Welcome to my channel. If you haven't seen my introduction video, this is my Porsche mini build, as I call it, the PigMi. Basically a classic mini shell with a Porsche drivetrain, using the engine, the suspension, everything that can be recovered from the Porsche and put into the Mini. The idea behind it is to use as much as possible of the original mini shell. I didn't want to do a space frame chassis with just a silhouette body shell, but I wanted to recover and use as much of the original mini shell and keep it a mini in itself. When I did this, the plan was to put some type of engine in it and use it for track days, for fun basically. Wanted to be something which was not like something already on the market, for example the motorbike engine ones which I've built in the past, or a Honda Civic engined Mini or anything like that. I had the idea of the Porsche because it's mid-engined, and from the measurements I'd taken off a car it looked like it would fit. So I took the risk and I bought a Porsche from Copart in the UK and had it shipped to Italy, where I live. Here you can see me that I've already started stripping the shell of the Mini. Everything that needed to be cut out was cut out. I left quite a bit more than when I built the motorbike engine one because I wanted a bit more strength. Hi, welcome to day 2 of the mini Porsche build. Yesterday started on dismantling the Porsche, the Boxster. It's looking interesting in the fact that everything should fit quite well, snugly, but it will fit. Even to the point of maybe taking the front suspension and front members all onto the Mini, but I think I want to use the original subframe on that one. On the rear, it's not bad. We've got these 2 bolts here holding on the rear subframe for the suspension. The engine is mounted with 4 bolts here on the front end. The rear end is attached to the gearbox, so that's pretty simple. A couple of bolts holding this brace on here, the suspension, and that's it. Now start dismantling a bit of the wiring, cabling, tubes, everything, and everything should fit very snugly into the Mini. The Mini side, everything is cut. Porsche seats are just fitted in there just for reference or space. From my calculations, that's about where it will be, in the furthest back position. A bit snug, but everything should fit, and let's move on. So first job was taking the engine out of the Porsche. This was for me the first time doing such a big job on a car. My background's not with cars, but with the hovercrafts, so much simpler mechanics. But it was good fun. A few things wouldn't come apart because of the corrosion from the winters in the UK with salt. But otherwise, most of it came apart pretty easily. I didn't want to cut too much away. Only things that I knew weren't going to be used, I cut off, and basically the rest I left as all on. Some of the connectors on the catalytic converters and other suspension parts were a bit corroded, but I managed to get them mostly off. Some I might have to put some new connectors on or new sensors. But it was pretty much all coming off reasonably easily. So, engine is out, dirty. Now, plan is make some jigs from the mounting points of the suspension here and the engine, and making everything on this jig that also has the suspension mounts up here, so that when we bring it over to the Mini, we can bring the roll cage supports to that. This is the part which I enjoy the most, fabrication. For me to fit the Porsche engine into the Mini, I needed to know exactly where all the mounting points were. Measuring them up and transferring them to the Mini would be quite complicated to get everything level. The easiest way I saw was to make a template which copied all the positions of all the mounting points and basically all the mounting points of the subframe, of the engine and everything else. This template or jig basically can be fitted back into the Mini bare shell, and all the mounting points for the engine, subframe and so on can be welded, built up into position on the new roll cage, and everything will be aligned straight away without having to do big measurements. Apart from aligning the jig in position, which I put a few bars horizontal with a level. All that was needed afterwards was to move the jig to the Mini, align all the holes that they were centered in the shell and that everything was at the right level. The levels had been already measured before I'd taken the car apart, so I knew what position it should be, and that was it. Weld it. The jig had to be made out of two parts because basically I wanted to keep also the position of the top suspension mounts, which were impossible to make the jig from below because due to the shape of the shell there was a reverse angle, which would mean that you'd have to make it out of two parts on either side and made it much more complicated. So in the end, the simplest way was a two-part jig, not three, with two bars going through the engine bay access area up to the top side of the shell and making jigs for the two suspension mounts on both sides. Once I had those mounts as well, that gave me the opportunity to just transfer everything across and also have the levels. Apart from the suspension mounts on the jig, we also had all the engine mounts on the front side of the engine and also the front parts of the suspension, the trailing arms and other parts all in the jig, incorporated in the jig, which would then be transferred over into the Mini. So, update, day three of the Porsche Mini build. I've now made the template, the jig for fitting all the suspension. It's not beautiful to look at, but it does what it needs to do. So, here we go. Here we've got the front rear suspension, front mounting, both sides. Using this as a basis for level. These two bars going up here go to the top struts. These are actually bolted in, so I can take them off. That way I can get it off the car. Here is a rear suspension subframe mounts. These are all welded brackets. Don't look at the welding, it's awful. And the front engine mount is there. So basically this will all be able to go back together outside of the car, and I can build the roll cage around that. As you can see, here is the top suspension mount mounted up to here. I made some small adapt plates just to follow the holes with some washers welded onto that plate, and as you can see, it all goes back down there. It's not the best way, but it should do. Now that I've got the template, the jig for the suspension and engine mounts and everything from the Porsche, working back from the center line of the wheels, I could then work out where the front mounting points will be, and from there I can then understand where I wanted to put the roll cage. I'm marking out the main hoop, basically transferring it on both sides. That way I can get an alignment of the jig and move it across. Next day, today we're making the roll cage. Well, making the template to make the roll cage. Idea here is to make the main hoop. Once we've made the main hoop, all the suspension mounts, everything can be built from there. So the idea here is to build a template which is the form of the inside of the car. Then I'll take that to a friend who will bend me a new roll bar. And from there, we will install that and then start installing all the suspension parts, which hopefully we can relate to the frame we made yesterday with all the mounting positions, and in theory everything will fit back together afterwards. Let's get to work. Here you can see me making the template out of cardboard. That was then transferred, taken to a friend who bent up the main hoop with me. Once we had the main hoop, it was basically cleaning up the mounting points, welding in some supports, some strengthening plates, and aligning the roll cage on both sides and basically welding it in. There was a fair amount of cleaning up I needed to do because I'd left a bit of material on because I preferred to cut less off at the beginning and have to cut it off afterwards. As you can see, I'm fitting the roll cage in. It was a reasonably good fit thanks to the template. Basically aligning it on both sides, taking different reference points. I'd used a laser for alignment, taking advantage of masking tape, remembering to put a line showing which side of the masking tape was the reference part. Then basically welding in some, I think it was 5mm plate on the floor to reinforce where I'm mounting the roll hoop. From the roll hoop, afterwards I'd already made a template of the main support bars for the front engine, side of the engine. Welding in the plates took a bit of time as I hadn't cleaned the shell as much as I would have liked to. As I said before, I plan to send this to be either soda blasted or sand or water blasted afterwards to get rid of all the paint and all the fillers and everything else which is on this shell because it's not in the best of conditions. After the plates were welded in, it was just a case of aligning up the roll hoop back in the marking points I put in and welding it in. Once these points were welded in, I then also proceeded to put all the rear horizontal bars in, which hold the gearbox support and subframe and suspension subframe. And unluckily, I didn't film this, and you'll see in the next video that everything has been already fitted and everything lined up pretty well, so I was very happy with that. Next day, well, we made the roll cage yesterday. The video is going to be a bit out of sync because I've already installed it and now started to build the framework for the suspension support and also the engine support. And as you can see, that's the front engine mount. Roll bar is in, supports are in, and yeah, it's moving on quite quickly. Hopefully next week we will start finishing the rear roll cage and we can start mating up the engine to see that everything lines up.